Hello Internet, this is not a game realization, but rather a follow-up on my Retcon video. There's been a bit of a setback on the actual game realization series, so I figured I'd make this video to keep you satisfied. At Rez2674 left a solid comment tearing down my realization, and I figured it'd be fun to respond to it for a low-effort video. Also, do not take this as a reason to attack this person. The reason I make game realizations is because I don't take other people's theories at face value, and having someone go into my comments to call me wrong makes me proud. Nothing but respect to Rez. Now let's go. Buddy, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking you just immediately stopped reading that Scott post right at that line, and then went on to make this video without reading the rest of it. Because literally your entire video falls apart with the last line of that post. To be clear, the one retcon mentioned was integrated pretty seamlessly, and most people didn't notice. If it had caused problems or confusion, then I would have addressed it here. Immediately that is a solid call out, as I quite literally did only read that one line. I've been following this franchise since January of 2015, and I just could not find that full post from 8 years ago. I remembered Scott made a comment about making one retcon, I struggled to find the original post online, and I settled for a relevant snippet on Google Images. Had I gotten to reread the full post, I honestly would have reconsidered that video altogether. Full disclosure, I still haven't found that full post, and at this point I don't think I've earned it. Bite of 83 versus Bite of 87 was the biggest confusion people had when FNAF 4 came out, and probably in the entire history of the series. It was the complete, absolute polar opposite of integrated seamlessly. Once again, I agree. I've always been on the side of FNAF 4 showing the Bite of 87, and while I still hold that opinion, I do remember the confusion, and I would not say that that is the retcon Scott was talking about. That's not even taking into consideration what he says literally immediately after the line mentioning the retcon. There have been other times, however, when my original intentions did not come across clearly. In those instances, I make a point to clarify in the next game. I use Sister Location to clear up a misconception from FNAF 4. The one thing that was cleared up in Sister Location regarding FNAF 4 was that it took place in 1983, since it was the password used for the private room keypad. He specifically mentions this as not a retcon, but a misunderstanding, meaning there really were just 2 bytes. This is the first point I'm willing to actually argue against. I know how Scott clarifies misconceptions using his later games, but the private room keypad tells us nothing about there being 2 bytes. A large part of the community at that time believed that FNAF 4 did take place simultaneously with FNAF 2, since Fredbear's byte should be the Bite of 87, and the Fredbear and Friends TV show was often written off as reruns. The private room keypad only clarifies the date of FNAF 4 being 1983, and does nothing to actually elaborate on the Bite of 83 versus the Bite of 87. Also, for all the workarounds he went through to explain the inconsistencies with what we knew about the Bite of 87, he forgot to give an explanation as to why they no longer let the animatronics walk around the day because of it, considering Fredbear was on stage the whole time. At first I neglected this detail because I was willing to consider it collateral with the bite being retconned, but with some extra thought I can actually still fight for this point. FNAF 3's training cassettes tell us that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is open alongside Fredbear's Family Diner, as it's the sister location where the spring-lock failure causes the yellow suits to be retired. These tapes also tell us that the animatronic pathfinding doesn't recognize safe rooms.
Every location is built with one extra room that is not included in the digital map layouts programmed into the animatronics or security system. This room is hidden to customers, invisible to animatronics, and is always off camera.
This implies that the classic animatronics were also able to freely roam the building until
There was the bite.
Marking this function as an additional hazard worked around with
Some kind of free roaming mode at night.
As of FNAF 2, Phone Guy explicitly mentions that
The robots were never given a proper night mode.
and while that is a questionable choice, the fact that night mode even exists as a concept implies it's already been implemented for the classics after the bite. The stuff with the Mangle and Toy Chica toys have been explained for a while now, and with an explanation that makes way more sense and is all but outright confirmed to be what Scott intended. They're 2 of the 6 connections between the FNAF 4 minigames and the FNAF 3 hidden minigames. Mangle's quest is the Mangle toy, BB's Air Adventure is the kid with the balloon, Chica's party is the toy Chica missing a beak, Shadow Bonnie's minigame is Spring Bonnie's shadow, Fredbear's minigame, Fredbear, duh. Happiest Day is the Bite of 83 scene. Both are set in a birthday party with balloons, with 4 kids wearing masks of the main 4 animatronics, all facing a 5th kid representing Fredbear/Golden Freddy. They're set up the exact same. I can see all of these connections, and while I do agree that my argument seems baseless by comparison, all of those details feel best applicable to Dream Theory, which is long proven to not be the case. Also, maybe I just don't see smart people online, but Tiny Toy Chica's beak is still an active debate in my corner of the internet, so I'd hardly call that explained for a while now. Also, and I don't have the patience to fact check this on Wayback Machine, so this might be an entirely baseless claim, but if I remember correctly, the Scott Games 8s and 7s also updated through other 80s numbers until it evened out on 83. I didn't really have a good place to mention that detail, especially since it may or may not be true and I may or may not be talking out of my ass. But if I remember correctly and it's true, that's another point for 87 imagery shifting to 83. FNAF 4 was, in general, about how the crying child's memories are broken and must be put back together for the children's spirits to be released. This is all reinforced in FNAF World's clock ending, where the 8-bit Fredbear plush guides you so that you do minigames that mirror FNAF 3's minigames, and ends with him talking to the crying child and saying that the pieces are in place for you. There's even a sprite of the FNAF 4 box open in the game's files. You know, the one Scott said contained the pieces put together. I respect the hell out of the FNAF World reference, and I actually have a major game realization planned involving that open box and the clock ending, but saying FNAF 4 is just about broken memories when so much of its story can be neatly traced back to the otherwise unexplained mystery that's been neglected since August of 2014 feels a bit stubborn. As I'd like to reiterate, FNAF 4 was planned to be the final chapter, and it provides our only leads to the series' biggest mystery. FNAF 2 being our 87 establishment gives us nothing to learn about the Bite of 87, and everything to learn why we don't need the Bite of 87. If it wasn't for the rest of that Scott Cawthon post, I'd say there's really no holes in this being what Scott retconned. Anyway, all that said, the actual retcon was most likely either the FNAF 1 newspaper saying the killer got arrested, you said the culprit never gets convicted, but that's not said at all, it just says he was captured and charged, or Phone Guy saying that Freddy's has existed for 20 years. Again, congrats on calling me out. I will gladly eat my words on this because I truly did just mess up there. I got into this franchise between FNAF 2 and FNAF 3. I remember debates like Frankenbonnie versus Salvage, and I make these game realizations to try and capture those feelings today. That being said, I'm not immune to being wrong. And when you have nearly a decade of this franchise on your back, it's easy for things to spill over, and I genuinely forgot the original criminal details. I just assumed that the purple guy we know to be the killer had always escaped, since the missing children's incident happened before FNAF 2, as the Wizards come pre-haunted, and purple guy is still hanging out in FNAF 2 is sometimes shown and Save Them. And plus he's also able to return and get spring-locked after the events of FNAF 1. With the writing of the safe rooms being off of cameras and the Spring Bonnie costume being used as a disguise, at this point it's impossible to imagine he was ever arrested for anything. Whether or not I'm right about the Bite of 87 eventually being changed to the Bite of 83, that criminal record absolutely fits the seamless retcon that Scott described. Also, I never really thought about it, but yeah, that 20-year claim is absolutely blown out of proportion. The classics have been around roughly 10 years at best, and they definitely got at least one bath. Once again, do not go and attack Rez2674. This video was made with zero malice, and I just wanted to make a quick video to respond to a smart comment. Think of Rez as you'd think of me, and think of myself as you'd think of MatPat. Good things can come from calling me wrong. Thanks for watching. My microphone cost me $30, OBS and Audacity are free, and Lightworks has a free license. So if you do your research the way Rez does, put your opinions out for the world to see. It's what I'm doing.